You've probably heard that Rome was the greatest empire in history, but here's what almost no one tells you. Rome didn't become great because of its emperors, wealth, or its monuments. Rome became great because it created something no other people of antiquity managed to replicate, a method capable of taking an ordinary man, completely average, and turning him into a human weapon almost impossible to defeat. And the most disturbing part? This method was so brutal that most people today wouldn't last even the first week. Forget everything you learned in school about Roman soldiers. The image of the heroic warrior with a shining helmet and polished shield is far from reality. The Roman legionary was forged through suffering, deprivation, and a level of discipline so strict that modern military training would look like a physical education class by comparison. Exhausting marches, physical punishments, sacred oaths, and even executions among comrades. All of this was part of a carefully designed system meant to create not just soldiers, but completely transformed men. And do you know what is most fascinating about this entire story? The principles behind this system didn't stay buried in the past. They still help explain why some people and organizations dominate while others fail, whether on the battlefield, in business, or in personal life. In this video, you'll discover how Rome transformed ordinary citizens into relentless legionaries, and why this story has everything to do with the world you live in today. Before Rome became the military colossus that dominated the ancient world, it was just a city-state with a fairly improvised army. During the early Roman Republic, every free man had the duty to take up arms when the city needed it. No salary, no barracks, no military career. Each citizen paid for his own equipment, marched to war when summoned, and returned home once the conflict ended. It was a system that worked as long as Rome was still just one city. The problem was that this logic of a temporary militia began to show cracks very quickly. When a farmer left his land to fight for months, the local economy suffered, harvests were lost, and the troops simply lacked the preparation of professional soldiers. Rome was growing, but its army was still thinking small, and that contradiction would soon demand a price. Territorial expansion changed everything. Rome began to control Western Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, and with that came enormous frontiers, provincial rebellions, and wars with no clear end date. The old temporary militia system simply could not keep up anymore. Rome needed permanent soldiers with standardized training and absolute discipline. That's when the great military reforms emerged, reforms that would transform the Roman army into something the world had never seen before. One of the most important reforms was led by Gaius Marius, who opened the army's doors to poor citizens, turning military service into a real career. Later, Augustus consolidated the system. He created regular pay, campaign bonuses, land grants upon retirement, and a fixed military service of about 20 to 25 years. Rome had just created the first truly large professional army in Europe. A Roman legion was not just a group of soldiers marching together. It was a military organization of surgical precision. Each legion had about 5,000 to 6,000 men, divided into 10 cohorts, which were further subdivided into centuries of around 80 soldiers, each commanded by a centurion. This hierarchy allowed rapid control in battle, efficient communication, and a tactical flexibility that left Rome's enemies completely disoriented. At the height of the empire, Rome maintained around 150,000 legionaries, along with another 180,000 auxiliary troops, protecting more than 10,000 kilometers of frontiers, from Britain to Syria and from Germania to North Africa. It was a system so well structured that every part knew exactly what to do, even when the chaos of battle threatened to swallow everything. Behind every Roman victory was something their enemies rarely managed to replicate: frighteningly efficient logistics. Rome built a vast network of military roads that crossed entire continents, along with strategically positioned supply depots, military forts, and ports that ensured the constant provisioning of troops. While enemy armies struggled to feed themselves and move across the land, Roman legions had everything they needed, where they needed it, and when they needed it. The famous Roman roads were not just admirable feats of engineering, they were the vital arteries of Rome's military power. A well-supplied legion could march up to 30 kilometers per day, crossing entire provinces in record time. This meant Rome could respond to threats with a speed its adversaries simply did not expect. The initial training lasted about 4 months, and there was nothing gentle about this process. Right from the first stage, recruits were subjected to exhausting military marches, 30 kilometers in 5 hours, carrying around 20 kilograms of equipment under rain, heat, cold, or dust, with no exceptions. As the training progressed, the distance increased, and the pace became even more demanding. Rome didn't want soldiers who could endure effort under ideal conditions. It wanted men who could function when everything was against them. Beyond the marches, the training included running, swimming, climbing, and weightlifting, all with a single objective: turning the recruit's body into a machine of endurance. Rome understood that a soldier exhausted during training was far more likely to survive in battle, and when the body had already reached its limit, it was time to place a weapon in that man's hands. After forging the body, Rome moved on to forging the warrior. Combat training began with wooden swords and shields deliberately heavier than the real equipment, so that when the legionary finally handled real weapons, they would feel light as feathers. The two main weapons were the gladius, a short sword designed for precise thrusts in close combat, and the pilum, a throwing spear engineered to penetrate shields and bend on impact, preventing the enemy from throwing it back. Training included combat against fixed targets, supervised fights between soldiers, and full battle simulations, all under the watchful eyes of war veterans, who received double pay specifically for this role. Rome did not let just anyone train its soldiers. And none of this preparation would have meant anything without something Rome considered just as important as the sword itself: absolute discipline. Roman discipline operated at a level that most people today would struggle to imagine. The man responsible for enforcing it was the centurion, who carried a vine staff that could even be used to punish soldiers whenever necessary. Common infractions resulted in beatings, imprisonment, or public humiliation. Serious crimes, such as cowardice, desertion, or disobedience, could lead to execution. Rome made one thing clear from the very first day: discipline was not optional. But the most feared punishment had a name that sent chills down the spine of every legionary: decimation. When an entire unit committed collective cowardice, 1 out of every 10 soldiers was randomly chosen to be executed by his own comrades. Julius Caesar himself applied this practice on occasion, and the mere fact that it existed was enough to keep any thoughts of rebellion far away. After completing all the training, the recruit experienced a moment that permanently transformed his identity: the Sacramentum, the Roman military oath. In front of his unit, he promised to obey without question, never abandon his comrades, and fight to the death if necessary. Initially sworn to the Senate and people of Rome, the oath was gradually transferred to the figure of the emperor, making each legionary personally committed to the man who ruled the known world. This oath carried enormous psychological weight within Roman culture. Breaking the Sacramentum was not merely a military offense, it was a betrayal of honor, of the gods, and of one's fellow soldiers. And to ensure that this commitment was worth it, Rome knew exactly how to reward those who honored their word until the very end. Rome was not ungrateful to its soldiers. Soon after taking the oath, the legionary began receiving a monthly salary, a share of war loot, and a military diploma that formalized his status. For men who had previously lived as simple farmers with few prospects, military service represented one of the few real paths to social mobility available in the ancient world. And the rewards did not end when service was over. After approximately 25 years of dedication, a retired legionary received land, money, and an enviable social status. For auxiliary troops, there was an even more valuable reward: Roman citizenship, which opened doors that had previously been completely inaccessible. Rome had created a system where brutal sacrifice came with equally significant rewards. What Roman training produced went far beyond a skilled soldier. It produced a complete transformation of identity. The man who entered the process as a farmer or craftsman emerged as something fundamentally different, a disciplined component forged within one of the greatest military machines the world has ever seen. It was not only the body that changed, but also the mindset, posture, and the way of seeing the world. Rome understood that to build a great army, it was necessary first to deconstruct the ordinary man. This transformation was so profound that many legionaries after years of service could no longer imagine another life. The legion became family, homeland, and purpose all at once. And what is most fascinating is that Rome's ability to transform ordinary men into extraordinary soldiers did not remain buried in antiquity. The Roman military model was so efficient that it influenced armies for more than 2,000 years. Elements such as intensive and standardized training, clear military hierarchy, strict logistics, and strict discipline remain pillars that still form the backbone of modern armed forces. When you observe the structure of contemporary militaries, it's possible to see, between the lines, the long shadow of the Roman legions. Rome proved that the greatness of an army does not lie only in the number of soldiers or the quality of its weapons, but in the strength of the system that sustains them. Nations that understood the logic behind discipline, organization, and collective belonging achieved extraordinary results. And when all of this is put together, it leads to a conclusion that completely changes the way we look at the Roman Empire. Now that you know the inner workings of the greatest war machine of antiquity, it's worth asking yourself, what did a simple Roman farmer, without money and without privileges, have that was different from you? The answer is almost nothing. What changed was the system he went through, a system that forged discipline, identity, and purpose in a way that very few people experience in modern life. More than 2,000 years ago, Rome proved that ordinary men subjected to an extraordinary process are capable of extraordinary achievements, and that lesson goes far beyond the battlefield. So, here's a challenge for you. How much of what you learned today about the Roman legions can you apply to your own life? What kind of discipline are you building? What system are you following to become a better version of yourself? Because in the end, Rome was not built in a day, and neither is any real achievement. The difference between the ordinary citizen and the legionary wasn't talent, it was brutal consistency, day after day. If this content helped you see history from a different perspective, leave a like. It helps the channel grow and keeps stories like this coming. And tell me in the comments, which part of Roman training surprised you the most? Was it the decimation, the 20-kilogram marches, the sacred oath? I'd really like to hear your opinion. And if you want to keep diving deep into the most fascinating stories of the Roman Empire, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications, because there's still a lot of powerful history coming your way, and you won't want to miss it.